You were going to be late, Duncan stated as we walked down the halls. Hell, we are probably already late. I don't think it matters. We'll be there, I said. They need us, said Duncan. Besides, you can't always keep watching him. You are doing nothing but hurting yourself. It's a complete waste of time. I can't stop, I remarked. Duncan turned to me. And now I assume you are going to see her as well now. I remained silent. As we approached a fork in the hallway, we stopped. Duncan shrugged his shoulders, his cloak gently moved up and down. He let out a deep sigh. Even through his mask, I could tell that he was concerned. It will get easier if you distance yourself, he said. There was a long pause before I answered. They are waiting, Duncan. Go ahead. I won't be far behind. I headed to the right path before Duncan could say anything else. I wandered down the hall in silence. It was peaceful. The soft glow from the candles on the walls calmed me. It was this stretch of time that I always felt the calmest. I was almost always alone and had enough time to dust out all the thoughts that caused me pain. Just me and the sound of my footsteps, rhythmic and unsurprising. Eventually, the hall opened up and I saw the gate that brought back the pain and misery that haunted me. I lost count of how many times I have seen the gates, but I will never forget the first. Back then, I feared that my life would end. It was the place of annihilation, a place of ultimate suffering. There was agony that no one could ever truly prepare for behind those closed doors. Before I could linger on it any longer, I pressed my palm into the center of the door. The smell poured into my nostrils as soon as the gate cracked open. Blood. I had grown used to it. There was no real way for me to avoid it at this point. But I wanted to make sure that I always noticed the smell. I felt that if I lost the ability to smell blood, I would be less human. I wanted to keep as much of that intact as I could. After all, there wasn't much left. I walked around the cascading hallways, ignoring the sounds around me to the best of my abilities. Any regular person would have lost their way in the chamber, but I had one specific path that had been engraved into my memory. I always came for one reason, and one reason alone. Before I knew it, I was standing in front of her cage. Hello, Lobel. Her voice was quiet. Iosefka, good to see you again. I would say good to see you, but I can't see anything past that mask of yours. Sorry, but you know that I cannot remove it here. So many rules you have to follow. I looked at her for a while. Haven't you had enough of this? It's been over a year now. If you just joined the cause, then you would be released. You don't have to be a slave to this anymore. A slave? Iosefka remarked. You are more of a slave than I am. You are a pawn, a nothing. Everything you do for someone else. You have no thought of your own. I am in here, enduring an infinite pain for over a year now. You couldn't even handle this pain for more than a day. I'm here by my choice. I am more free than you ever will be. We have had this conversation many times, and every time I lose my nerve. I know that I lose it, but I just can't help it. I placed my hand on the lever beside me and looked at Iosefka with violent disgust. In the smoothest voice that I could muster, I said, I know this is a little early, but enjoy your execution. I will come visit again. Iosefka started yelling out as her body was lowered into the abyss.
Damn you, Lobel! Go back to your damn war! Go die for your city! Go die for the Paileon!
I needed to rush out of there. Before that I knew that I was even moving, I was already outside the gate, back in the calm glow of the hallway, in silence. My anger quickly flushed itself down. I took a deep breath. No more wasting time. It was time for me to go and join Duncan and the others. The word slave stuck with me as I rushed down the halls. My thoughts circled around that word, and I thought of him as well. I am still amazed at just how complicated things had gotten. I spent the rest of the time walking, reminding myself that I was not a slave. I was suddenly very aware of the mask that covered my face and started to feel suffocated. My speed increased. I approached a second gate, guarded by 2 soldiers. As they saw me walking up, one of them said, "Late as normal." "Just let me in," I demanded. "It's unbecoming of a man in your position to keep acting like a fool," he said. "And you are a fool for aggravating me. Step aside, or I will remind you exactly why I am your superior." They opened the gate quickly, and I walked past them. After a short distance, I was greeted by an open room, with one ray of light that shined from the ceiling, illuminating the walls in a bright light. The walls surrounding me were decorated with masks, just like my own, hanging on their assigned hooks. My hook was empty. I heard the sounds of the spell that kept my mask on my head release itself. I quickly removed it and took a deep breath of air. I ran my hands through my hair and rubbed my eyes. Thank God. I finally made it to the House of Soldiers. It was good to feel my flesh again. The hard surface of the mask is just an annoying barrier to my face. It was just another thing disconnecting me from my humanity. I knew the purpose of it, but many times I felt too constrained. It felt great to finally place it on the hook. It was also a relief to know that it would be a while before I would have to put it on again. After all, missions usually took at least a whole day, if not much longer. I gave my body a little bit of a stretch and headed up the nearby staircase. I saw Duncan by the window with some binoculars. It seemed that he was surveying the next target way off in the distance. I could already hear it screaming. Everyone looked at me when I walked in, unsurprised by my tardiness. Some of the soldiers stood up to greet me. "Captain is here." They were part of the 5th Division, the division that I was placed in charge of. They all respected me, but I didn't really care for any of them. I didn't bother learning any of their names, so I ended up assigning them numbers. Number 1 was the one who greeted me. They all rose to their feet. I ignored their greeting and walked up to Duncan. I was much more interested in the upcoming battle. Even without the binoculars, I could see its massive shape, though the details were faint. "So, how is Yusefka?" Duncan asked. "Never mind about her. Tell me about this thing we're looking at." "Huh, just as I expected. You know, you really can't blame anyone but yourself. I've tried to warn you. I said, that's enough." "Fine, Lobel. Just don't be distracted during the mission. I have more than just you to worry about." I ignored his words and grabbed the binoculars out of his hands as he lowered them. I brought them quickly up to my eyes. I began studying the creature, my stomach clenched in anticipation. The thought of bringing this behemoth down made me very excited. I was more than ready for the battle ahead. "So, this is the next Cathedral Terror?" I asked. "Yes, and a disgusting one if you ask me." "Can you bring me up to speed? I assume you already have a plan." "Actually, we already started. You see how the creature is writhing in pain? Well, that's because Gerland in the 1st Division has already infiltrated its skull." "Already? From this far away?" I asked. "I didn't think they would make it, but Gerland pushed for it. The Paileon's range is increasing. I suppose that's a good thing." "Of course it is. The Paileon's power is growing. Our cause. It's showing some real progress." "God, this thing is ugly," I stated. "I'm guessing it's the usual plan?" Duncan nodded. "You guessed it. The anatomy of this Cathedral Terror is still basic enough for that plan to work." The usual plan was quite simple, really. the first party strikes the top of the creature, which causes the inner defenses to start climbing upward. Then the next party strike at the mid and bring more of the defenses away from the base of the monster. Once the base is left completely vulnerable, the final parties enter and destroy it, sending the whole creature toppling down. I only remember it ever working a handful of times, though. The insides of these cathedral terrors are always unpredictable, though it was good to have a plan of action to begin with. I set down the binoculars. Duncan looked at his division and at Alice. "It's time to go. Lobel, Baylor, you follow us in after 30 minutes pass." Alice and Duncan quickly headed up the nearby staircase with their divisions. I went ahead and followed them. I wanted to feel the open air, and I was very anxious to enter the creature. My division followed me obediently, but Baylor and his division stayed behind. As we walked up the stairs, I thought to myself about the division leaders. Gerland, the leader of the first division, was certainly the strongest of us all, though I trusted Duncan much more than him. I never really talked to Alice, though I have seen her in a fight, and I wouldn't ever want to piss her off. Baylor was different, though. He always seemed lazy, as if he never actually was trying, though there was no doubt in his abilities either. And then there was me. I looked back at my division and thought about how I needed to worry about them. What a drag. But the church leader decided that I was to be captain, so that is the role I must play. As long as I was strong enough to fulfill my role, nothing else really mattered. At the top of the staircase was one final door. This one was smaller than the others, but incredibly thick, bolted, and locked shut in multiple ways. Duncan undid all the locks. When he finally opened the door, the sound of the wind poured through, and I felt the air push against my body. We were finally outside. The sight always astounded me. From within its body, I couldn't even feel the Paileon move or hear anything from the outside. Total isolation from the rest of reality. But outside I can see the Paileon in all of its terror and its incredible beauty. Every time I look up at its face, my breath escapes my lungs. I look upon that face, and I remember the truth of the world, the truth of this hell, and the truth of my decrepit life. And that is something I always have faith in. For me, this is freedom. Out here, there are no rules. Everything is chaos, and everything is dangerous. This is as simple as it gets. I looked at the scenery. The great fiery mountains were fierce, but the Paileon's height still exceeded their peaks. I was careful not to go over the edge. A several thousand-foot drop into a burning and twisting sand landscape would have been extremely unpleasant. I focused on the monster again. Its howls rang clearer out here. I could see the distance very slowly being closed in. The Paileon was slowly approaching it. Out here there were a few sets of massive black pods. Duncan and his division approached one, and Alice and her division approached another. Duncan looked at all of his companions and yelled out, "Here we go! Trust your instincts. Be aware of your surroundings, but do not be hinged by them. Do not be deceived by false truths, and beware of the nightmares that come from within. I hope to see you all again once this is over. To war!" Duncan and the rest of them walked inside of the pods. As if it was just a giant pile of goo, they slid right into its surface. Once everyone was in, the energy charged up. Within minutes, they blasted through the sky inside a dozen black tendrils. I watched as the black streaks flew furiously across the sky. Soon enough, I watched them strike the creature off in the distance, one cluster in the left stomach, the other in the right. The creature yelled in pain. Another successful infiltration. To pass the next 30 minutes, I tried to think of all the other monsters I have helped topple. I remembered my first time inside one of them. It had taken us 3 days to bring that one down. I had almost died several times during that mission. I remember the fear that I had. It's funny, really, how scary it can be to almost die, even though it is impossible to die here. Still, the pain is something to fear. Thoughts of Yusefka filled my brain again, and anger swelled up inside of me. I couldn't wait to go to battle. Eventually, Baylor walked up with his division. We said nothing to each other. He directed his division to follow him, and they stood by one of the pods. I walked towards another one myself, and my division followed without me saying a word. "It's time," Baylor stated. I pressed my body into the strange surface and felt it engulf me. There was a strange sound as I entered the material, but then there was silence. I would have to trust the Paileon to shoot me towards the demon in the distance. I looked at the target from within the pod and braced myself for launch. Within minutes, a big blast pushed my body forward. The ground beneath me flew so quick that it was almost nauseating. We approached the demon at an insane speed. "Here we go," I said to myself. I felt nothing as we struck the skin of the creature. Our bodies fell to the surface, and the pods that enveloped us disintegrated into nothing. Immediately after my pod vanished, I was greeted by an enemy. I quickly brought out my weapon and activated it. I destroyed the creature with one strike. As the rest of my division's pods landed and opened, Number 1 asked, "Captain, are you all right? That was just a pawn. Or do you really think I am weak enough to fall prey to something so insignificant?" Number 1 shut his mouth and nodded. Number 2 walked up and examined the creature that I had cut in half. "We saw these in the last Cathedral Terror. They induced nightmares from the beaks as they stabbed the body. I hope the others are okay. I wouldn't think that multiple Cathedral Terrors would have the same types of monsters." "The terrors all originate from the same place," I responded. "There really isn't any rhyme to the madness. The creatures are endless, diverse, but they can repeat. It doesn't make much of a difference for us. Just understand that everything that moves out here is your enemy." She nodded, welcoming the advice that I gave her. Number 1 then stated, "I didn't think we'd find one down here so quickly. Do you think the plan failed?" We surveyed the scenery. The landscape here was much more structured than I imagined, based on the exterior look of the Cathedral Terror. The buildings were all uniform and placed evenly next to one another. There was even a constructed sky that really opened up the space, creating the illusion that there were no walls. It was surprisingly pedestrian. "It seems that there was only one straggler," I stated. "And Number 2, I wouldn't worry about the others. They can hold their own. Let's just worry about finding the pillar. And we have to be quiet. We want to find the pillar before it finds us." We walked through the streets slowly, controlling our footsteps. We walked through the gaps of the houses, avoiding the large main streets. We walked around the corners and proceeded carefully. It was quiet, but that only added to my anticipation. The longer the silence continued, the more my hair would stand on end. It seemed that a few hours passed, and there was nothing. I found it strange since the houses were not particularly tall. It shouldn't be taking this long. The more time passed, the more fighting Duncan and the others would have to endure. The others were counting on us to bring the pillar down. Suddenly, there was a loud smacking sound that came from the left. I turned to find the source and saw one hand pressed against the window of the house nearest us. I could faintly see the details of a ragged face underneath dark shadows behind the glass. "Look away," I demanded. "We can't do anything for them." These were the souls that were damned that the Paileon could not save. It had just occurred to me that inside every single one of these houses were souls that were trapped and tortured, enduring the pains of hell without a choice. "We can't help them?" Number 3 asked. "It's too cruel." "That's the straw that they drew. It can't be helped," I answered. "Remember, this is why you fight." I moved forward, and the rest of the team followed. As we moved, the others started whispering to one another. "I can't believe this is life for them now. Yeah, it just makes the Paileon look so much better. I mean, do you remember life in there? We didn't have to go through any of this." "No, we didn't. They kept us fed and clean. It makes me wonder why we broke the rules." "It's because we thought there was something better," I responded. They continued to chatter, but my thoughts went elsewhere. I thought of my life within the Paileon, before I was a soldier. I thought about how strange it was, and how empty it felt. But it was a life that was worth living. There were rules set up to protect us, rules that I ignored, and my consequence was being ripped away from him. I wondered how he was doing. He was probably doing his usual routine of going to the library, or meeting with his new friends. I wish that I could be a part of that life again. The best that I could do was to be a powerful soldier, to protect him. There was a large cracking noise that came from behind us. We were silenced. We turned our heads slowly. And there it was. The pillar. We all pulled out our weapons, but there was no time to act. The pillar opened its maw. And everything turned to black.